you guys so much for listening. I want to thank you so much for the encouraging words. I want to just ask that you continue to keep me in your prayers and that you continue to listen and watch us on Spectacular Magazine Radio Show. My next guest is civil rights attorney Anita Earls. Thank you so much for visiting with me today. We are going to talk about voting rights, and there's so much to talk about, but I want to get into with attorney Earls, who can explain to us. Let's start out, first of all, talking about you a little bit and your work with voting rights here in North Carolina.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. So I've been a civil rights attorney for 30 years, and most recently I was executive director of the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. And with that organization, we litigated a number of voting rights cases in North Carolina, including cases about the vote suppression law that has made changes in how we vote, and cases around gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering. We keep hearing that word. Can you break that down for just very basic?
Right. So it refers to how our election districts are drawn, and it's a word that means the districts are drawn in a way that disadvantages one group of voters and advantages another group. And so there can be both racial gerrymandering and partisan gerrymandering.
What came out of the cases that you worked on?
Well, as a result of those cases, that's why we have new districts this time for our legislative seats, and that's why the legislature had to redraw the congressional districts in 2016.
Yes, but this past week or the last week or two, I'm hearing even on national news about North Carolina has to redraw their lines. Please explain, what are they talking about?
Well, when the legislature redrew the congressional districts in 2016 because they had been found to be an illegal racial gerrymander, the legislature said, we are only going to look at plans that have 10 Republican districts and 3 Democratic districts. And that's in a state that's pretty evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats.
Okay.
So a federal court found that those were a partisan gerrymander. Then the U.S. Supreme Court decided a case from Wisconsin and remanded the North Carolina case to look again at whether the plaintiffs in the North Carolina case had met the standards set by the Supreme Court. So the second ruling that we just got, again said, yes, these districts are partisan gerrymander, and the court in that case raised the question of whether it would be possible to make changes in time for the 2018 election.
So they have not actually ruled or made those changes yet?
That's right. We're still waiting to hear whether the court will say that we should go forward with the current districts for one more election cycle, or if the court will say, no, it's time to redraw and change the election schedule in some way.
Attorney Earls, why is this subject so important to you personally?
Well, I've been litigating redistricting cases for a long time, and it really impacts your right to vote, because it's part of your right to vote is access, just getting a ballot. But then the next step is your vote should count the same as everyone else's. And when the districts are unfair, your vote is not counting equally.
But do you have personal history that makes it?
Oh, why is it so important to me? Yes. Well, I would say that two things. I certainly understand how the right to vote is fundamental to everything else. So whether you care about education or healthcare or employment, jobs, whatever, all of those things that matter to our communities, voting is fundamental to having your voice heard. In terms of me personally, I grew up in a mixed race family. My father's Black, my mother's white. And that experience really made me feel that it's so important to work for equal justice under the law. And when I was growing up, I remember very vividly, my grandmother could not read or write. And so for her, it was a challenge to be able to vote. She often would vote absentee in the house so that a family member could help her. But she tried to vote. Despite the hurdles that she faced, it was important to her to vote. So that's another thing that's always made voting important.
And you're trying to do something about that, aren't you, by running for office? this?
Well, yes. So at the end of last year, I left my job at the Southern Coalition, and I've been campaigning full time for the one seat that will be on the ballot for the North Carolina Supreme Court, because I think it is so important that we have
Voter ID, will that be required for the general election in November?
Now, there is no general law that says everyone has to bring an ID. There is a federal law, and if you registered by mail and the last four digits of your social security didn't match what they have on record, so that's a very small subset of people. But if you're in that narrow category, you may be asked for an ID when you go to vote. But generally, right now, there is no voter ID. There is likely to be a constitutional amendment on the ballot for voters to decide whether or not they think there should be voter ID.
Okay, and what about for college students?
Well, again, there's no voter ID requirement right now. So college students, once you turn 18, you can register and vote. And in fact, we now have pre-registration, so 16 and 17-year-olds can register.
Oh, okay.
But college students can register and vote. I encourage them to do same-day registration at early voting. Early voting will start October 17th and run until November 3rd. And that's just an excellent opportunity. If you're early voting, you can register and vote all at one place, at one time.
What's at stake in this election?
Well, a lot of people are saying this is the most important election we've had ever because of the real choices that voters have and the way in which our democratic institutions have been threatened, both at the state level and the federal level. So I'm running because I see how the system of checks and balances in our government think it's important to have a court. There's three branches of government. We have the court, we have the legislature, we have the governor and the executive, and they should each be working together, and there should be a system of checks and balances.
And they should all have the same amount of importance.
That's right, and I think that's how our state was founded, and what our state constitution currently establishes.
Now, the position that you're running for, this is a statewide position.
That's right. Every voter in North Carolina will see my name on their ballot.
Okay, so it won't matter about what district you're in, whether
right.
the lines are redrawn or not. That does not actually affect you for your election.
That's right. But something that people should know is that we no longer have straight party ticket voting. It used to be you could go in and check one box and you would vote for all the candidates in that party. Well, this office is partisan now. So the state Supreme Court is a partisan office, but you have to go down the ballot and vote for every office. There's no straight party ticket voting. And this office, even though it is statewide, will be down at the bottom of the list of candidates. So I urge people to vote the entire ballot.
And go all the way down to the bottom. That's right.
Flip it over and put something on the back.
Because we have amendments.
That's right.
Oh,
those will also be at the bottom.
Yes, and we'll have to talk about that another day. So we want to make sure that we understand. So I have been visiting with civil rights attorney Anita Earls, who is also a candidate for the North Carolina. Early voting starts October 17th. It runs through November 3rd. The general election is on November the 6th. That's right. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you've done up to this point in working in our state and working.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate you getting this information out to voters because it's so important to vote November 6th.
It definitely so. So that's going to do it for this week. I think that I just want to thank you guys so much for supporting me over this last year. I want to thank you that you've supported me over the last 15 years with Spectacular Magazine. I will be back in 2 weeks. And until next time, I want to say thank you to my in-studio staff, Lawrence Davis, DC Collins. You guys, thank you. Thank you for my guest, civil rights attorney Anita Earls, IFC Executive Director Emeritus John Dorward. You guys, thank you so much. You have a spectacular week. And until next time, see ya.